So now I would like to turn it over to the New York Transit Museum's Director, Concetta Bensavenga, to open our program today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Good afternoon. I'm Concetta Bensavenga, the Director of the New York Transit Museum, and I wanted to take a moment to welcome you all to this very special event this afternoon, and thank you for being here with us today. 10048. That was the zip code of 6 World Trade Center, the U.S. Custom House, where I worked. And having mapped out all of the various combinations of ways to get there, as luck would have it, it was the 2 through to Chambers, and then the 19, remember the 9, to Cortlandt Street. That was the best way to go. So tonight is special to me because this was my work home, and this was actually my station. I share that as a way to frame today's conversation because, like many of you, this is both a profoundly personal and global experience. And perhaps to ground those of you who aren't familiar with the before space and place in just what a daunting task rebuilding the station and reframing this space actually was. To maintain reverence for what was, mindful of what was lost, and to honor a vision for what is still possible and aspirational. Remember, perhaps the best of us was an order of the tallest magnitude, and thus, what an achievement to be able to do just that, as we are about to see. My thanks to Jennifer Coulter for bringing forth today's program, our colleague Sandra Bloodworth of MTA Arts and Design, and Jan Ramirez of the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, and the incomparable Ann Hamilton for being here today, and for the gift to the city and to all of us that is Chorus. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Concetta, for your remarks. And now I am pleased to introduce our panelists for the discussion this evening. Ann Hamilton is a visual artist, internationally recognized for her large-scale multimedia installations, public projects, and performance collaborations. Among her many honors, Hamilton has been the recipient of the National Medal of the Arts, Heinz Award, MacArthur Fellowship, United States Artist Fellowship, NEA Visual Arts Fellowship, and she represented the United States in the 1991 Sao Paulo Biennale and the 1999 Venice Biennale. Jan Seidler Ramirez is Chief Curator and Executive Vice President of Collections at the National September 11th Memorial Museum, joining the staff at the project's outset in 2006. Under her guidance, the Memorial Museum's collection has grown to include many thousands of objects, artworks, photographs, films, oral histories, and audio artifacts, architectural relics, and other primary evidence materials relevant to 9/11. Previously, she served as Vice President and Museum Director at the New York Historical Society, and prior to taking that post in 1999, was Chief Curator and Deputy Director at the Museum of the City of New York. And Sandra Bloodworth is Director of MTA Arts and Design, the program responsible for visual and performing arts throughout the MTA transit system that engages riders, enriches stations, and encourages the use of mass transit. Sandra began her career with arts and design in 1988, and under her leadership, arts and design has become one of the most diverse collections of public art in the world. Throughout her tenure, she's worked with innumerable artists in various capacities through arts and design's many programs that include the Permanent Art Program, Digital Art Program, Graphic Arts, Lightbox, and music, among others. Collaborating with the Poetry Society of America, Sandra has been the lead on the Popular Poetry in Motion program since 2012. She's the author of New York's Underground Art Museum, MTA Arts and Design, and has given lectures nationally and internationally on art and public transportation. Thank you all so much for being here and for sharing this important, beautiful project with us. Sandra, I'll now turn it over to you to begin our conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Concetta, and the entire museum for inviting us to participate tonight, to have the opportunity to mark this occasion, the 20th anniversary, by sharing this journey we've taken for almost 20 years that we were involved on the creation of the World Trade Center Cortlandt Station. Now, during our conversation, you're going to see these images that you see now scrolling. And the images of events and particular meetings, working meetings, they're captioned. But predominantly the images that you're looking at reflect Anne's process in the creation of her proposal images, as well as various stages of fabrication in the Myers studios. They're also installation images, and all of these images aren't captioned, as they're really self-evident. And some of them will become more evident as you hear our discussion tonight. These images will run continuously and somewhat randomly during our conversation. Now, I am really delighted to join Anne and Jan in our conversation today. And I was thinking, Jan, that maybe to begin, why don't you ground us in some of the really early phases of the public thinking around 9/11 that took us from a point of contemplation and sorrow and on to the path of memorializing.
I'm happy to do that. You know, I think it's, as you were mentioning, it's a series of progressive revelations that really perceived around needs that were always shifting, sort of one after another. So let me first, you know, think about those first 12 months. And as you mentioned, I mean, initially it was just the just shock and horror, which then quickly gave way to a sort of a desperate hope for survivors, replaced by a terrible realization that those efforts were going to have to shift into a recovery effort that would also be paralleled by a debris removal and cleanup operation. And by the end of May of 2002, with that essentially accomplished in the pit of what became the pile that had become the pit, there was the new phase, that maze of sort of legal, insurance, engineering, planning considerations around the scheduling of restoring what was essentially 13 million square feet of obliterated commercial office space. You know, and I remember the business community sort of urging us to summon our defiant optimism by daring to erect tall buildings again, skyscrapers to replace those that had been destroyed. We certainly know from chatting with outsiders that who were reliant really on photographs and reports about Lower Manhattan's above ground destruction, that they were essentially unaware of the complete devastation inflicted on the sort of underground infrastructure of Lower Manhattan. Most were, you know, fully unaware of the implications of the loss of the World Trade Center's transit hub, which we know because we used it, connected commuters from, you know, 2 states to the country's financial heart, and also connected them to the 3rd busiest interior shopping mall in the United States at the time. The call for a memorial at Ground Zero was actually an early sort of through line in these rapidly evolving concerns. You know, it was the call to set aside a space on this stricken campus, this 16-acre campus, where we, the survivors and the witnesses and the bereaved, could come to grieve, to reflect, to pay our respects to what was then still unconfirmed numbers, thousands of individuals who had died on September 11th and who were missing. And I will say that to this very day, 40% of the victims of the World Trade Center attacks remain unidentified with any, you know, corporeal remain. So it's a very restless event. That call for memorial, though, I had to go back and look, was very exceptionally early. I think back to the op-ed piece that was published in the New York Times by Philippe de Montebello, who was director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where he's again arguing that we safeguard sacred ground for a memorial park of some sort at the site. And specifically was advocating the preservation of the skeletal shafts of upright World Trade Center steel that had somehow managed to, survive the pulverizing physics of this attack. In his opinion, they were sort of this awesome Gothic ruin. And as we know, for practical reasons, they could not be preserved in situ. We will then fast forward to the inevitable launching of an international design competition for World Trade Center Memorial that went forward. It went forward in 2003, resulting in early 2004 in the selection of Reflecting Absence as this winning submission, a collaborative design that would partner Michael Arad, who was then a relatively young, unknown architect, with the veteran landscape firm of Peter Walker. And as most New Yorkers know, the memorial was dedicated on the 10th anniversary of the attacks in 2011. And finally, I'll say that as the engineering design of Reflecting Absence began to take off, there was a companion call really for an interpretive place, an interpretive entity that would recapture the presence of this historical event and the people that were entangled in it, a place where the future, people from the future could come and, learn more about the what and the why and the to what end of 9/11, such as those answers could possibly be, questions that had really no firm answers so soon to these precipitating events. And the 9/11 Memorial Museum was dedicated in May of 2014 as the companion to the memorial serving as our roof. And part of that is because by 2005, the underground vestiges of the archaeological ruin of the pit of the bathtub had been placed under federal landmark preservation law. So that meant the public had to be given meaningful access to these resources, and that meant the museum was going to be sort of the place, the embrace, the artifact where that took place. So I'll just leave it at 2014 for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. The MTA, just picking up sort of where you are speaking of with the museum, the MTA had to coordinate the overall site and master plan with the whole redevelopment, rebuilding of the site. Really until that was developed, transit really couldn't begin. And it was only after there was a master plan. And when it was established, then transit could start to envision how best to rebuild through the site and the station. And that included so much: station underpinning of the structural box, creation of designing a contemporary station that would work within the Calatrava hub, recreation of signal, track, and power systems. And this is just really naming some of the major things. Now, all of this involved multiple entities and of course had to consider the families. It was delicate with competing visions, and all these considerations had to be part of it. However, this did allow that our station project, to develop and to have time to really evolve. And it happened with a couple different iterations and visions for the stations, yet not really quite there. And so by 2014, it was really clear that we had to create the way to create a holistic vision that would meld the art and the architecture was to commission an artist and have an artist respond to the place. And this is where Anne came in. So through the arts and design selection process, Anne was selected because of this powerful, thoughtful proposal. So Anne, I was thinking maybe if you could share your concept for the World Trade Center's Cortlandt Station with us, and also maybe you could help those that may have never been to the station to understand the station's physical presence within the hub and its physical connection to the memorial site. Anne?
Yeah, thank you, Sandra and Jan. You know, Jan, as you were speaking, I just kept thinking about how history is something that is always being made. And I think that is something that really haunted me as I came to make this proposal, is to think about, you know, how can I find form or give form to the enormous personal sorrows and the need for, and the tension between, you know, private memorial, private mourning, and public mourning. And how can I give form to that? So in many ways, you know, I think to make a proposal for this site felt like an enormous gift to me. So I just wanted to start there. And then to describe it, you know, the subway is not literally part of the memorial, but it is the threshold through which one might enter or leave. Whether you're a daily neighbor, you know, working in the neighborhood or living in the neighborhood, or you're visiting the site maybe only a single time. And I started to think about what then are those foundational documents that really ground our civic aspirations, and what are the words we need to hear now, say now, and in what form can we feel those words as something that we can actually enact. And so as I worked on this, the form is very important because the piece itself physically stretches along the length of both the northbound and the southbound waiting platforms. And so while it's made up of words, it's composed differently by each person who makes their way, reading at the pace of walking along those platforms. And what you're reading are this vocabulary that comes from these foundational documents. It is literally, just as each of us weave with history and our time in a different way, this is a weaving of historic documents. One, there are vertical phrases that structure the length of the platforms, and they come from and are very familiar to those who know the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And there's 6 phrases, and those verticals then intersect on the horizontal lines with the occurrence of those same words in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which was drafted at a time of also enormous cultural shift and trauma after the Second World War. And it's the weaving of the national and the international documents that I felt creates a unique repetition of this language, and one that can be actually come a chorus as you walk along it, which is the name of the piece. But physically, as you can see in the images that are scrolling behind us, one of the most important things is that this is not printed letters on a white background, but this is an all white piece. It's white marble. It addresses in many ways the adjacent space of the enormous public hub, the Calatrava design space. And what the words become legible because they are just proud of the surface. So perhaps before the letters, before the words speak to you, the tactile quality speaks to you and reaches for your hand. And the fact, I don't want to monopolize this conversation, but the fact that it's something that you touch is a form of enactment. And I'm thinking a lot about how these documents hold civic ideals and aspirations for life, social life above ground. And how do we carry those aspirations and that language with us? And what I hope is that as people come and go from the station, those words carry inside them in a way that they can touch. So I think in these images, you can really see that they're proud of the surface. They reach for your hand. I've watched people when they get off the subway walk towards that wall, and it's like a reflexive response to put your hand out to know it.
Yeah.
At a time when touch is so contested, this feels like a very powerful way of connecting.
And do you mind if I just hop in for a second to say that really it's just so interesting, these tactile experiences of the station and then of the 9/11 memorial, because indeed the names edging the pools, which are cut into, not in relief, but cut into the bronze parapets, are both exceptionally private experience for families that can come and touch their loved ones' names, but the public is welcome to do the same. They can find a name that, you know, might be their own name, or just a name that's beautifully rendered, or a surname. You can festoon the name with flowers or notes, but it is the gesture of touch that is both, you know, very intimate and very communal. And it's always a very moving thing to watch people interacting, you know, with outdoor memorial in that way. There's also a privacy to it, because when Michael Arad was arranging the names, families were invited to suggest meaningful adjacencies. You know, maybe it was two brothers together, or an engaged couple, or two people who had met in the urgency of that horrible morning to help one another that had been strangers before. Those meanings are known to the families. They're not necessarily known to the public that comes on any given day to pay their respects.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking about this and what you're saying, Jen, and Ann's thoughts about this in the touch. You know, it really, I've always sort of held on to this thought, or this phrase I've heard said many years ago, but that some of the best public art creates this intimate experience in a very public place. And I think of that with the memorial. Of course, I think of it certainly here. And it also brings to mind that sort of the similarity, the thing of the museum, and how the museum engages people. The 9/11 museum just engages you so. And it's the same thing that you're describing. And when you see the people touching, the expression on the faces, in a way, there's a similarity in how both of these places are bringing people in and creating a meaningful and experience. And without a doubt, I think that goes to all our customers, our people who come through. They're experiencing this, and it's just a similar almost presence of each of the people you see there. And I just find it profound that Anne, you were able to create that. I mean, we knew where we wanted to be, but we did not know in any visualization of what that was. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear you talk about when you talk about your response at that point and how that came to you.
Well, I think I took a very deep breath. It felt like a tremendous responsibility. And I think partly what you're articulating, Sandra and Jan, both in different ways, is the way in which the museum and perhaps this piece in the subway make a condition to be alone together. Mm-hmm. And so it's like that this is something we share in very different ways. And how can I come up with a form that actually invites that, but doesn't determine what your experience is or what your narrative that you might take away is. And so, you know, I think that the fact that it's white on white, that it's tactile, that it's a landscape, it envelops you, it's the whole length. All of those things are invitations into it that are very quiet. So it invites, I think, a kind of silence and a kind of quietude, while the words themselves are very strong and very bold and very clear. And so, the poetry is like, how do you balance these things? Just as how do you balance the national, the personal, the national, and the international? And, I think in the making of any work, it's that wanting to make something that is open to experience while it's very materially specific.
Yes.
And that's the art. And I think that I just had tremendous partners at every step of this. The Franz Meyer in Munich, who fabricated this with this incredible team, really understood how important it was and is in their craft to honor the handmade. And I think the fact that when you walk along this, that this is handmade, you feel that. And maybe the thing that art needs to do is help us feel the things that it's so hard for us to articulate. And so, I think I had this double, mission in some ways of like, how do words feel all the meanings that we need them to be for us at any particular time? And, I think that there's a felt presence of the hands that made that, and then hopefully the ones that carry it away in their hearts with them.
You just spoke about sort of all the various teams, and there were so many people made this happen. And I've been credited with saying something that I think I remember you were the one to say it, but in talking about that all through that time, and of course the studio, and doing something that, to my knowledge, mosaics have not been used as sort of embossed visually before. But along the way, one of us said that everywhere, every step we turned, there were things that could stop this project. And you've said, I believe, that everywhere we asked, we got a yes, a chorus of yeses. And so I know where that came from. And that was so true. It was, and I'm talking hundreds of people from the chairman down, because we were doing something that was beyond what our art program had really done. And it was yes all the way to every person that had a mark on this place in some way. Their hearts fell open and they said yes. And that is why it's here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is true. And I do remember saying that, and I'll say it again, that, projects only happen because, or a condition is made for them to happen. And that is certainly true of the complex history, certainly of the museum coming into being, this station being rebuilt. And those become, in many ways, all those hours and hours of conversation and really creative work administratively to make the condition that allows something to happen that someone can't experience yet, because it asks people to trust what might happen and the possibility for that. And sometimes that's a big ask. So, we were lucky, and we did just keep getting yeses. And at every level, that is how this piece comes to be.
As we're looking at the word, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to note too that I didn't say that on the northbound side of the platform, and it's structured with a spine of words, which is like a list like you see here from the southbound. And the word is everyone. Mm-hmm. The occurrence of the word everyone in the UN document, which in and of itself, the fact that that document was written and signed. Although it's not a legally binding document, it is one that sets foundational history for all human rights documents going forward. And it felt really important to me that the piece be open and that be exclaimed in this word, everyone. Everyone has the right, everyone is here. This acknowledgement of the individual and the hand within the collective and the tension that has in our culture in ongoing ways all the time, as we're experiencing now. This, what is our responsibility and our individual presence and right, and what is our responsibility to the collective? And that's something like history that is always being negotiated and made.
It's funny, that's what I was going to ask you about too, if you could share some of that for the spines and the word, and particularly everyone. It's a word that, it's hard to figure out the balance of it, the role of the individual within the everyone, but yet knowing until we can do that, and that we're inclusive of everyone, then we can't move forward.
When I think about Jan, like I'm thinking about all of your work in the museum and what a complex choreography it is to invite and embrace across the scale of that. And maybe you could talk about that relative to how, you found form in the museum for that experience, to invite that experience.
Well, I can say that having been, a curator at other museums, I became deeply intimate with the fact that the term Memorial Museum was by far, it was not a neutral term. The memorial attached to this museum gave it a hybrid character that was challenging and powerful, and in a fascinating way, the geography of the site with the two missing towers, with the plunging pools that then form the stalactites dropping down 50 feet towards bedrock. We were able to work with that geography and sort of separate in a way our mission into the historical, factual, reckoning with the timestamp, the repercussions of the day on the north footprint side of our space, and really sort of tap into the affective or the heart or the tribute side of our mission on the south footprint side. So we were able to sort of take the hybrid quality of a memorial museum and pair them in a way, in oddly, because of the architecture of the event and the absence of the buildings itself. I was also thinking, just to the discussion about everyone, one of the things that strikes us, I think, about the power of the story of 9/11 to interest people, and the way people from all walks of life have we see as visitors, is that it is really a story, of course, about the loss of, but also the grit, the resourcefulness, the true triumph of ordinary, extraordinary, everyday people. It is about us. It's not about elected leaders. It's not about university presidents. It is about the backbone of who made New York work, and who was working in New York at the start of the 21st century. And I find that is one of the, in the memorial exhibition, you walk in and there are faces of the victims, 2,983 individual faces, and you do sense, I hope, you're embraced by that huge diversity and magnitude. There isn't a face in there that a visitor can't find and connect with. both in terms of age and ethnicity and, background. But it is a story about everyone, both those who were there that day and those that came to help, and those that are still, paying the price for coming to help.
Yeah, and I wanted to also thank you for the 9/11 Museum hosted, talking about all those people that did so much, hosted an event at the museum for everyone that was involved in the rebuilding and creation. And that acknowledgement, Jan, was just incredible, for so many. To be invited to the museum, and then for them to be, everyone to be acknowledged for the excellence of this project. Now, we've won many awards on this project, but nothing could have meant more than this praise coming from Alice Greenwald, the director, and you, and the museum. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, well, I mean, the thanks are completely reversed back to, people that just selflessly came and gave so much of themselves to get New York and the country up and running again. I mean, it just was, we didn't know at the time, but many have now, tragically become that second wave, that second generation of casualties. In this particular case, it's not the act of terrorism itself. It is the second catastrophe of the environmental catastrophe that 9/11 represented. And, not to get too statistically wonky, because I'm bad at math to begin with, but I think it, we say that on the day of, as many as 90,000 people were exposed to the witch's brew that came from those buildings as they collapsed, and then the fumes and the burning underground kettle of the World Trade Center that, the fires didn't extinguish until the end of December. And today, as of this month, there are more people that have passed away from 9/11 toxic triggered diseases than died, because of the terror attacks. And those numbers are only going to go up. And what that meant for the 9/11 Museum, we honestly did not see how rapidly this was going to happen. And as these heartbreaking statistics came in, and we were hearing that, whereas families do have a place to come at the 9/11 Museum to remember their loved ones and touch their names, and survivors can come and certainly symbolically see the survivor tree, the calorie pear tree, and find something that really speaks to their experience, or the survivor stairs that are in the museum. We were sort of missing a place for the rescue recovery workers, construction workers in particular, to come and feel they were part of the story. And so, quite remarkably, Michael Arad and Peter Walker decided to evolve the design of the outdoor memorial. And that led to, I think about a year, Sandra, after we hosted the reception for MTA Transit, the dedication of what we call the Memorial Glade, which is the southwest corner of the memorial, and that is specifically set aside to acknowledge and to thank and mourn, the valor and the loss of life and the injuries for these thousands and thousands of people who came to help. And what's been very touching for me as a curator is that now, armed with the knowledge we have about, respirators and what was in the air and, the dust and all of that, many have said to us, if called again to serve under these conditions, they would come and serve. So I do think that is the extraordinary, power of this story. And we end. Not that there is really an ending to the 9/11 story, which continues, but as you are exiting Foundation Hall at the museum, there's a quote that an operating engineer said, and we thought it was quite beautiful. And it is along the lines of saying, you know, we walked here, we walked in as individuals, and we're going to walk out together. Mm-hmm. And it seemed, you know, the beautiful finding of community through this effort, which was, should make us all feel fairly good in otherwise crisis situations, that, you know, the person that you see sitting on the subway, you know, whose nose might be in your, you know, might be jostling you for a seat, or, you know, the elbow is right at your, jostling your glasses off. That is somebody who is prepared to help you and be kind and give you support. And I do feel that it changed my view of kind of New York altogether.
Can I just want to jump in on that, Jan, because I think that you're talking about the social fabric, and I'm a weaver, and this is a woven piece. This weaves two foundational documents together to put it into your hand. And, you know, the thing about cloth is that every thread has to do its work for the cloth to hold. And so many of our metaphors for social relationships are really still based in that material reality of cloth. And so it's really beautiful what you're describing. And it actually is, for my very small part of this site, it's like, it is literally a woven piece, and everyone who crosses it, whether they're crossing the subway or the museum or, you know, the larger site with the fountains, they're weaving their own trajectory through it, and they're strengthening, hopefully, all of those threads. And so that's, you know, deeply a structure that connects, I think, the larger project.
Yeah, it's just been great, you know, talking with you guys. And I think probably we should give everyone the opportunity to ask some questions. But I want to certainly thank you, both of you, and Jennifer for organizing and working with us on it. Thank you. Jennifer, you want to step in now? Maybe let me see if I can, maybe we can read some of the, you know, one of the questions I saw coming in, and was that talking about your work and seeing you really in your work as performance, and wondering how, and I think in some ways you probably, this was a question that came in early, and I think you've answered some of that, but I wondered if you might want to elaborate a little bit of that connection.
I would love to. I mean, I think that there's so many connotations with the word performance, but I would say maybe it's performative in that the piece is animated. It's a fixed thing, and it's made alive, and it's animated by the people who experience and walk along it. And because it's made up of words, it means that every single person crossing it is making their own composition. So it remains actively something that's in composition. And in that way, I think you could think of that as being performative, but it's not, I'm not making the performance. It's really in the hands of the public. And maybe like you, Sandra, who's like made this amazing condition for artists to be invited into a very complex project, which you do again and again in all of the different projects that you do, and you shepherd and protect, that is that I'm making it, like you, I'm making the condition for that to happen. But it's like, also I'm trying to give it away, and I'm trying to give that authorship away. Yeah. Make it something for everyone.
And there are a lot of incredible questions in the chat. Thank you everyone for just wonderful questions. Two, I think, are sort of neat. Somebody's asking what font you used, and or sort of what was the kind of catalyst behind the design of the letters. As you know, we have a very passionate beloved font group associated with the system. So I think that's a neat one. And then, so the second one, I'll just throw out two together. the first is the font. And then the second is, I love this one, describe the moment and thinking of putting these two documents together and that they would work for the memorial. And what was your sort of aha moment? What were you doing and how did it come to you?
Well, I have to admit I'm having a totally senior moment about the font, but it's something I worked months on. Trajan, thank you. Oh my God, thank you, Sandra. Because I was like, oh, I have the book in front of me. And I worked actually with a designer in Stockholm who I've worked with on other projects, Hans Kohn. And really, Hans and I went back and forth around a lot of different fonts, but we felt like this classical font, which really had been, has continued to have a contemporary history, really came from a ruler of peace. And that legacy was really important to this. And Hans and I spent numerous hours, like the size, the leading, the kerning, like all of those things that actually then are translated into the marble. And then the second question about the weaving, I think that I looked at so many different documents and I kept thinking about what are those words that you almost know in your body without having to read the document. So it really started with the Declaration. And then there was a real search. And initially the project was maybe going to be made, or at least in my mind, as I developed the proposal of multiple different documents from different sources, international, national, and it felt like it was going to be really confusing. It needed this language that is very direct. And it's the kind of language that is set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so when I found that, you know, like I said at the beginning, the project was a gift. It really, it's like it came out of the air and it was like given to me. And then it had this incredible team to shepherd it through into a physical thing.
Wonderful. So there's two other questions. One I'm not going to make you answer, Anne, and then another one. There's somebody's asked, how was rail service maintained after 9/11 through reopening? For those of you who are interested in that, I just want to tell you there is an incredible website, which is free and available to everybody. It's called bringingbackthecity.com. And you can hear first-person testimonials from the transit emergency response folks who did all of these things, who shored up the system, who evacuated, and it is free and available to everybody. I encourage you to do it. These are first-person testimonials of the men and women of transit who responded on that day and the subsequent months. So please, please go check out bringingbackthecity.com. But there is a really great question, which I think is so resonant. It says words like, and it is quite different for a memorial and a beautiful piece of art to be so tactile. And you know, the words like touch and fabric and woven have been used throughout the talk tonight. Can you talk about the selection of the material, specifically the texture, which is so different?
So it's a white marble mosaic, and so the small individual pieces are like, you know, the crossings of thread in a cloth, and it has like the documents, a national and an international source for that stone. They are formed through a hand process, as I've said before, and it felt really important that the material resonate with the building adjacent to it. That is white. It's also like the whiteness is like a kind of blankness, which means that it's full of possibility. And I think that sense of this is just the ground, but now we have to enact the possibility of these aspirations. And so the fact that it's white, I think it creates the ground for that to be imagined or happen.
You know, I'll just add that when we do interviews with 9/11 survivors, very often there is a sequence to how they tell their story that involves the invoking of, you know, the collapsing buildings, the avalanche of black debris that enveloped them, the thinking that they were dying or about to die, and that gradual, in some cases it may have taken several minutes, penetration of light, and the clearing and the return of light again, and the appreciation. It's almost like a, you know, kind of a rebirth experience. But the way light itself that day, whether it was a flashlight, somebody, you know, was illuminating it, you know, allowing people to find their way out of some rubble-strewn pocket. The importance of light and the moving towards the light. You know, we may never get there in our own lives, but striving towards it, I think, is a beautiful way for people to be thinking about their experience coming to the heart of the Memorial Plaza itself, which is such a dark event that had lightness that followed, lightness insofar as moving forward and daring to take the next step and the next steps and daring to rebuild and renew.
I see someone's asked a couple times, when was the station completed? And it was 2018, and we were there in September when they did the ribbon cutting. And
yeah, so that's 2018, September of 2018, so not that long ago it reopened again. And again, I feel like, I know that we are about out of time. And I just wanted to thank our panelists again. Where the Transit Museum proper is having a little bit of technical difficulty, so you get me, everybody. And I just wanted to sort of end where we started and say that this is, you know, to do the impossible, to envision the best of us in the darkest of days is the work that's carried forth, you know, certainly at the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, and in Chorus. Again, what a gift to us and to the city. And Sandra, and the work that you do at MTA Arts and Design, you know,
thank you.
Under New York, or just the incredible, remembering that we as a people are deserving and worthy of art and artistry, craft and craftsmanship as we move through the state daily lives. And certainly, you know, at the Transit Museum, we are delighted, we are honored, we are privileged, and we are duty bound to tell these stories as well. So we know that this is going to be a very intense couple of days for lots of folks, but we are very grateful to everyone for joining us this evening for this conversation about taking the worst of days and turning it into the best of aspirations for us all. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much to our panel. And we look forward to seeing you all soon at the Transit Museum in downtown Brooklyn.
Thank you, Conchetta.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.